The champagne flutes chimed against the Chicago skyline, a perfect symphony of success for the city's newest partner at Sterling Arch. But in the reflection of the glass, Lucas saw what he wasn't supposed to, his wife's hand lingering a second too long on her boss's waist, a touch too intimate for a celebration of merit. It was the moment the silence in their marriage finally made sense. The promotion wasn't just a career step, it was a trade. If you find yourself drawn to the quiet, devastating moments where a life fractures before it breaks, stay with me as we unravel what happens next. The air in the ballroom of the Langham Hotel smelled of expensive lilies and old money. It was a scent Lucas Thorne had grown accustomed to, a sensory backdrop to his wife's life that he was merely visiting. He stood near a pillar wrapped in white silk, swirling the ice in his scotch. Across the room under the grand chandelier stood Elena. She was radiant in emerald silk, a color that made her eyes look dangerous. She was laughing at something Julian Sterling said. Julian, the CEO of Sterling Arch, had one hand in his pocket and the other resting on the back of Elena's chair. It was innocent enough to the casual observer, a mentor congratulating his protege. Tonight was the night, after all, the junior partnership. The culmination of 5 years of missed dinners, canceled vacations, and Elena's exhausted collapses into their bed at 2 a.m. But Lucas was an architect of landscapes. He was trained to notice how things were rooted. He watched Julian's fingers brush the bare skin of Elena's shoulder. It wasn't a tap, it was a stroke, a possessive, familiar slide of a thumb against her clavicle. And Elena didn't flinch. She didn't stiffen. She leaned into it imperceptibly, like a flower turning toward the sun. The ambient noise of the gala, the clinking silverware, the jazz quartet, the low hum of networking seemed to drop away, leaving Lucas in a vacuum of silence. "She looks happy," a voice said beside him. Lucas turned. It was Marcus, one of the paralegals. "She worked hard for this." "She did," Lucas said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Hollow. "She sacrificed a lot." "Well, it paid off. Sterling never promotes anyone this young. She must have really impressed him on the Dubai project." The Dubai project. The one that had required 3 weeks of travel last month. The one where Elena had stopped answering his calls after 9 p.m. because of the time difference. Even though Lucas knew the time difference better than anyone. Lucas looked back at the table. Julian leaned down to whisper something in Elena's ear. Elena's gaze shot across the room, seeking Lucas out. For a second, their eyes locked. Usually this was the moment she would smile at him. A silent "save me" from this bore signal. But tonight her eyes were wide, glassy. There was guilt there, and worse than guilt, there was pity. She looked away. First, she looked back at Julian, and the corner of her mouth lifted in a small, conspiratorial smirk. The realization didn't hit Lucas like a punch. It settled over him like a heavy snowfall, cold and burying. He wasn't the partner in this marriage anymore. He was the obstacle she had learned to navigate around. The promotion wasn't a reward for her architectural brilliance. Though she was brilliant, it was a down payment. Lucas set his untouched scotch on a passing waiter's tray. He checked his phone. No messages, just the wallpaper photo of them from a hiking trip in Oregon 3 years ago. They looked tired in the photo, windblown, but they were holding on to each other like they were the only two people on earth. He looked up at the woman in the emerald dress. She was raising a glass of champagne, toasting to the future. A future that had been bought and paid for, and he was the currency she had spent. Lucas didn't storm over. He didn't throw a glass. The scene didn't demand a scream. It demanded an erasure. He walked to the coat check, the ticket trembling slightly in his hand. "Leaving early, sir?" the attendant asked, handing him his wool coat. "The speeches haven't started." "I've heard everything I need to hear," Lucas said softly. He buttoned his coat against the Chicago wind awaiting him outside. He walked out the revolving doors, the warmth of the gala fading instantly into the biting chill of the riverfront. He didn't hail a cab to their apartment. He began to walk, the cold air stinging his lungs, clarifying his mind. He knew exactly where his suitcase was stored. He knew exactly how much money was in their joint account and how much was in his personal savings. He knew that if he walked fast enough, he could be gone before the applause died down inside. Lucas Thorne turned the corner, and for the first time in years, he didn't look back. The apartment was quiet. It was the kind of heavy, expensive silence that money bought. Thick insulation, triple pane glass blocking out the Chicago traffic, the hum of a climate control system that kept the air perfectly filtered. Lucas closed the door behind him and locked it. The click of the deadbolt echoed down the hallway, sounding like a gunshot in a canyon. He didn't turn on the main lights. The ambient glow from the city outside filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long blue shadows across the living room. He looked at the white leather sofa they had bought 6 months ago. He looked at the abstract painting Elena had insisted on for the foyer, a chaotic splash of red and black that he had never liked. He realized with a detachment that frightened him that he was standing in a museum dedicated to a stranger. Lucas walked to the bedroom. He didn't rush. Rushing implied panic, and he wasn't panicked. He was precise. He pulled his suitcase from the back of the closet, the leather cool under his fingers. He packed only what was undeniably his. 3 suits. His drafting tools. The watch his father had given him. He left the clothes Elena had bought for him, the trendy shirts that were too tight, the cashmere sweaters she liked to show him off in. He left them hanging in the closet, a row of empty skins. He moved to the bathroom. Her perfume bottles were lined up on the marble vanity like soldiers. He caught his reflection in the mirror. He looked older than 32. The lines around his eyes were etched deep with fatigue, the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with notifications. Congratulatory text for Elena, a missed call from his mother. He went into the settings. He disabled the location sharing he and Elena had set up for safety. He unlinked their shared cloud accounts. Then he did something final. He opened his banking app and transferred exactly half of their savings into an offshore account he had opened years ago for a project that never materialized. He left her the house, he left her the car, he left her the furniture. He took only the crime that would keep him alive. He walked back to the kitchen island. The granite was cold against his palms. Lucas twisted the gold band on his left ring finger. It resisted for a moment, catching on the knuckle before sliding free. The skin underneath was pale, marked by a permanent indentation where the metal had sat for 7 years. He placed the ring on the counter. It made a sharp, metallic tink. Beside the ring, he placed his key to the apartment. There was a notepad by the fridge, a pen resting on top of it. His hand hovered over it. The urge to write something, a curse, a question, a goodbye, surged in his chest. Why? He wanted to ask. Was I not enough? But he pulled his hand back. Elena was a woman who thrived on words, on negotiations, on spinning narratives. Giving her words would be giving her something to work with, something to twist. Silence was the only thing she couldn't argue with. He zipped the suitcase. The sound was like a zipper closing up a body bag. Lucas took one last look at the apartment. He memorized the way the moonlight hit the floor, the way the shadows stretched toward him. He wasn't just leaving a physical space. He was amputating a limb. He turned his back on the view. He opened the door, stepped out into the hallway, and let the door close on its own. He didn't wait to hear the latch click. He was already walking toward the elevator, the wheels of his suitcase rolling silently over the plush carpet, moving toward the vanishing point. Elena unlocked the door at 2:15 a.m. She was humming a jazz tune from the gala, the melody floating off-key in the quiet hallway. Her feet throbbed in her Louboutins, a dull ache that felt like a badge of honor. She had won. The junior partnership was hers. Julian had toasted her 3 times. She pushed the door open, expecting the soft glow of the television, or Lucas reading on the couch, waiting to play. The supportive husband, waiting to hear about her triumph. "Lucas?" Her voice absorbed into the darkness. There was no answer. She frowned, flipping the switch for the foyer lights. "Lucas, don't tell me you're asleep. I brought champagne." Silence. The apartment felt different. It wasn't just quiet, it was sterile. The air felt still, undisturbed, as if no one had breathed it for hours. Elena kicked off her heels, wincing as her arches hit the hardwood. She walked into the living room, tossing her clutch onto the sofa. "If you're doing that thing where you pretend to be asleep because you're mad I stayed late, it's childish, Lucas. Julian needed to introduce me to the board." She walked into the bedroom. The bed was made. Not just made, it was pristine, the duvet pulled tight, the pillows arranged with a military precision Lucas never used. A prickle of irritation crawled up her neck. He wasn't here. Unbelievable, she muttered. She assumed he had gone for a drive. He did that sometimes when the pressure of her schedule made him feel neglected. He would drive along the lake, brood for an hour, and come back apologetic, ready to make her tea. She went to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. She needed to hydrate. Tomorrow was her first day as a partner, and she couldn't show up with a hangover. She reached for a glass and stopped. On the dark granite island, illuminated by the under-cabinet lighting, sat two objects: his house key and his wedding ring. Elena stared at the gold band. It looked small, innocuous. She laughed, a short, sharp sound that scraped her throat. Dramatic, she whispered. So dramatic. She picked up the ring. It was cold. She rolled it between her thumb and forefinger. He was trying to punish her. He wanted to scare her. He wanted her to call him, frantic, begging him to come back so he could feel important again. She refused to play. She dropped the ring back onto the counter. It rattled and settled. Fine, she said to the empty room. Sleep at a hotel. See if I care. She went to bed, stripping off the emerald dress and leaving it in a pile on the floor. She slept deeply, fueled by the exhaustion of the week and the champagne. But the next morning, the silence was louder. Elena woke up at 7 o'clock a.m. The other side of the bed was cold. The coffee pot, usually programmed by Lucas to brew at 6:45, was empty. She checked her phone. Oh, hey, Shadow. No texts, no missed calls. She dialed his number. It didn't ring. It went straight to an automated operator. The number you have reached is no longer in service. She pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at the screen. That wasn't right. She tried again. Same message. She sat up, the sheet pooling around her waist. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Not fear, but a sudden disorientation. She logged into their bank account on her iPad. The balance was exactly half of what it had been yesterday. She ran to the closet. His side was neat, organized, but stripped of the essentials. The suits were gone. The drafting tube he kept in the corner was gone. Elena sat down on the floor of the closet. The smell of his cologne, cedar, and rain still clung to the shirts he had left behind. It wasn't a tantrum. He hadn't gone for a drive. For the first time, the reality of the night before pierced through her narcissism. She thought about the way Julian's hand had lingered on her back. She thought about the look in Lucas's eyes across the ballroom. Not anger, but a terrifying resignation. She stood up, her legs shaky. She was a partner now. She had a meeting at 9 o'clock a.m. She didn't have time for this. She would fix this later. She would find him, yell at him, and then forgive him. That was how their dynamic worked. But as she walked out of the apartment, leaving the ring on the counter where he had placed it, the echo of the shutting doors sounded like the final note of a song she hadn't realized was ending. 5 years is enough time to change a skyline, but it wasn't enough time to erase a ghost. Elena stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her corner office, looking down at the Chicago River. It was a steel gray ribbon cutting through the city, indifferent and constant. The office behind her was a testament to everything she had clawed for. It was 3 times the size of her old cubicle, furnished with Italian leather and a desk made of reclaimed walnut. On the frosted glass door, the etched letters read, Elena Vance, senior partner. She took a sip of her espresso. It was lukewarm. The numbers don't add up, Julian, Elena said, not turning around. Julian Sterling was lounging on her office sofa, his feet up on the coffee table. He looked older than he should. The charm that had once dazzled the board of directors had curdled into something oily. His face was puffy, his eyes perpetually bloodshot, hidden behind designer glasses. You worry too much, Elle, Julian said, waving a hand dismissively. It's just a cash flow pinch. The stadium project will clear it up. The stadium project is 6 months behind schedule, Elena said, finally turning to face him. Her voice was sharp, the voice of a woman who had spent 5 years cleaning up messes she didn't make. And the contractors are threatening to walk. We missed the last 2 payments, Julian. Where did the capital go? Julian didn't answer. He picked at a loose thread on the sofa. Elena knew where it went. casinos in Macau, bad investments in crypto, expensive weekends in the Cayman Islands, with women who looked younger every year. She had traded Lucas, steady, loyal, brilliant Lucas, for this. She had traded a partner who built foundations for a partner who dug holes. I can fix it, Julian muttered. I just need time. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like you regret it. The air in the room grew thin. Lena walked back to her desk and sat down. She didn't regret the career. She loved the power. She loved walking into a room and seeing men straighten, their ties in intimidation. But she hated the silence that followed the meetings. We have a potential buyer, Julian said suddenly. Elena froze. What? A European conglomerate bond. Vesper Holdings. They've been acquiring boutique firms in London and Berlin. They approached me last week. They want a foothold in the Midwest. You didn't tell me. I'm telling you now, Julian said, standing up. He buttoned his jacket, trying to summon the ghost of his old authority. They're sending a representative next week to audit the books and discuss the acquisition. If they buy us out, we're set. We cash out, keep our titles, and let them handle the debt. It sounded too good to be true, and in Elena's experience, too good to be true usually meant a trap. But they were drowning. If she didn't find a lifeboat soon, Sterling Arch would collapse and her reputation would go down with it. Who is the representative? Elena asked. Some proxy, doesn't matter. The owner is the one calling the shots, but he's private. Keeps to the shadows. Julian checked his watch. I have a lunch. Handle the audit prep, will you? You're so good at the details. He walked out, leaving the door open. Elena stared at the empty doorway. She was the senior partner, but she felt more like a glorified janitor. That night, she returned to her penthouse in the Gold Coast. It was beautiful, cold, and silent. She poured a glass of wine and sat on her balcony. She pulled out her phone and, as she had done every week for 5 years, typed his name into the search bar. Lucas Thorne. Nothing, no social media, no LinkedIn, no architectural awards. It was as if he had stepped off the edge of the earth that night he left the ring on the counter. She touched her neck, where a pulse beat steadily against her skin. She told herself she checked on him out of curiosity, not longing. She told herself she was better off. But as she looked out at the city lights, she couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was coming. The acquisition. Vesper Holdings. It felt like the other shoe was finally about to drop. Elena finished her wine. She didn't know that the storm wasn't coming from Europe. It was coming home. The rain in Chicago had turned the city into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. Inside the main conference room of Sterling Arch, the atmosphere was brittle. Elena straightened the stack of portfolios on the mahogany table for the third time. Her hands were cold. Opposite her, Julian was pacing, checking his reflection in the glass partition. He smelled faintly of mints and desperation. Stop pacing, Julian, Elena snapped. You look guilty. I'm just energetic, Julian lied, adjusting his tie. This Vesper Holdings group, my sources say they're aggressive. They don't just buy companies, they gut them. We don't have a choice, Elena reminded him, her voice low. The bank called this morning. If we don't secure this capital injection by Friday, payroll bounces. We are selling or we are sinking. The intercom buzzed. The receptionist's voice was tremulous. Mr. Sterling? Ms. Vance? The delegation from Vesper Holdings is here. Elena took a breath, locking her knees to stop them from shaking. She put on her game face, the icy, impenetrable mask that had gotten her through the last 5 years. Send them in. The double doors opened. 2 men in charcoal suits entered first. Lawyers, clearly. They carried briefcases and wore expressions of practiced boredom. They didn't look at Elena or Julian. They moved to the far end of the table and began setting up laptops. Then the air in the room seemed to shift. The temperature dropped. A third figure walked through the door. He was tall, wearing a bespoke navy suit that fit with the precision Sterling Arch could no longer afford. He didn't carry a briefcase. He walked with a fluid, predatory grace, his gaze fixed straight ahead. He didn't look like a man entering a negotiation. He looked like a man inspecting property he already owned. Elena felt the blood drain from her face so fast it made her dizzy. The sound of the rain against the window faded into a high-pitched ringing in her ears. The man stopped at the head of the table. He placed a single fountain pen on the mahogany surface. Then he looked up. It was a face she had kissed 1,000 times, but it was also a face she didn't know at all. The soft lines around his eyes were gone, replaced by a hardness that aged him 10 years. His hair was shorter, styled sharply. The glasses were gone, but it was the eyes that stopped her heart. They were the same hazel, but they were devoid of warmth. They were flat, calculating, and terrifyingly calm. Lucas? The name escaped her lips as a whisper, a question that sounded ridiculous the moment it was spoken. Julian froze mid-step. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lucas Thorne didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He didn't acknowledge the history that lay bleeding on the floor between them. He looked at Elena not as his ex-wife, but as a liability on a balance sheet. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Vance," Lucas said. His voice was deeper, stripped of the gentle cadence she remembered. It was a voice of command. "I represent Vesper Holdings, or rather I am Vesper Holdings." He pulled out the chair at the head of the table, Julian's usual seat, and sat down. He didn't offer a hand to shake. He didn't smile. "Lucas, I don't," Elena stammered, her composure shattering. "Where have you been? It's been 5 years." Lucas opened the file in front of him. He didn't look up. "We are here to discuss the acquisition of Sterling Arch's assets and the restructuring of its debt," he said, his tone clinical. "Personal inquiries are not on the agenda." He looked up, then pinning Elena with a gaze that felt like a scalpel. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer to declare bankruptcy today. My lawyers have the paperwork for that as well." The silence that followed was absolute. Elena looked at the stranger wearing her husband's face, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly small. "No," she whispered. "Good," Lucas said. He tapped the file. "Then let's see what's left of this house you built." The transition wasn't violent, it was surgical. Within 48 hours of the acquisition, the Sterling Arch logo was removed from the lobby wall. In its place, nothing was hung, just a clean, blank expanse of slate gray. Lucas didn't fire anyone immediately. He didn't make speeches. He simply occupied the space. He took over the corner office, Julian's office, and left the door wide open. The symbolism was clear. He was watching. Elena sat at her desk, staring at a summons on her calendar. Project review, 2:00 p.m. L. Thorne. She smoothed her skirt, checking her reflection. She looked tired. The last 2 days had been a blur of audits and legal reviews. Julian had been relegated to a consultant role, effectively stripped of power and banished to a smaller office down the hall. He was currently sulking at a golf club in Naperville. Elena was alone. At 1:55 p.m., she walked to the corner office. The room smelled different now. The scent of Julian's expensive cigars was gone, replaced by the crisp, clean smell of ozone and architectural paper. Lucas was standing behind the desk, reviewing a set of blueprints for the Waterfront Museum, Elena's pet project. It was the design she was most proud of, the one she hoped would win her the Pritzker one day. "Sit," Lucas said without looking up. Elena sat. The chair was lower than she remembered, or maybe he just seemed taller. "This cantilever," Lucas said, tapping a section of the blueprint with a red pen. "It's decorative." "It's aesthetic," Elena defended, her voice automatic. "It mirrors the flow of the river. It's the centerpiece of the visual narrative. It adds $4 million to the budget and compromises the structural integrity of the West Wing," Lucas replied. He drew a sharp red line through the curve she had spent 3 months perfecting. "Cut it." Elena felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. "You can't just cut it. It changes the entire soul of the building." Lucas finally looked up. His face was unreadable. "The soul of the building is irrelevant if the client goes bankrupt building it. Sterling Arch has a reputation for over-promising and under-delivering." "That ends today." He closed the file and pushed it aside. He picked up another stack of papers. "Lucas," Elena said, her voice dropping, softening. She leaned forward slightly. "I know you're angry, I get it, but don't take it out on the work. We used to talk about this, about how form has to inspire. You taught me that." She waited for a flicker, a recognition, a memory of the nights they spent on their living room floor, sketching dream houses they couldn't afford. Lucas looked at her. For a second, she thought she saw something behind his eyes. But then he blinked, and it was gone. "I'm not angry, Ms. Vance," he said. "I am efficient. And I didn't teach you to design vanity projects for ego stroking. I taught you to build things that last." He opened a drawer and pulled out a personnel file. Her personnel file. "Your contract is up for renewal in 3 months," he said, his tone casual as if discussing the weather. "Under the new management, all senior partners are required to reapply for their tenure, based on performance metrics, not relationships." The implication hung in the air like smoke. He knew. He knew everything about how she got the promotion. He was telling her that her currency was no longer valid here. "Are you threatening to fire me?" she whispered. "I'm giving you a chance to prove you actually deserve the job," Lucas said. He checked his watch. "I have a conference call with Zurich in 5 minutes. Fix the cantilever, Elena, or I'll find an architect who can." He looked back down at his papers, dismissing her. Elena stood up. Her legs felt heavy. She walked to the door, feeling the weight of his indifference pressing against her back. He hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't mentioned the affair. He hadn't asked about the ring. He had done something far worse. He had looked at her work, the only thing she had left, and told her it was flawed. As she walked back to her office, passing the hushed whispers of the junior staff, she realized the terrifying truth. He wasn't back to punish her. He was back to erase her. One red line at a time. It was 10:45 p.m. The cleaning crew had come and gone, their vacuums humming a low dirge for the workday. The city outside was a blurred smear of neon through the rain-streaked windows of the 42nd floor. Elena sat at the drafting table in the common area, her eyes burning. The redesigned blueprints for the waterfront museum were spread out before her, anchored by cold cups of coffee. She had removed the cantilever. She had simplified the facade. She had done exactly what he asked, and yet the design felt dead. It lacked structural honesty. The voice came from the shadows near the break room. Elena didn't jump. She had felt his presence for the last 10 minutes, a gravitational pull she couldn't ignore. Lucas walked into the pool of light cast by her desk lamp. He had loosened his tie, the top button of his shirt undone, the only sign of fatigue he allowed himself. "I did what you said," Elena said, her voice tight. "I cut the vanity. I prioritized the budget." "I can see that," Lucas said. He walked around the table, his fingers trailing over the paper. "But now it's boring. It's safe. You traded risk for security, and the result is forgettable." Elena stood up so abruptly her chair rolled back and hit the wall. "Stop it." Lucas looked up, his expression mild. "Stop what?" "Stop playing God, Lucas. Stop acting like this is about architecture. You hate the design because I drew it. You're tearing it apart because you want to tear me apart." She took a breath, her chest heaving. "If you want to fire me, just do it. Stop making me dance for you." "I'm not making you dance," Lucas said softly. "I'm making you look." He walked closer to her. The space between them crackled with 5 years of unsaid words. "You think this is revenge," he said. "You think I bought this firm to punish you. But that would imply I still care enough to be hurt. I don't." "Then why are you here?" Elena demanded. "Why come back?" "Because I hate wasted potential, and I hate bad design." He leaned against the table, crossing his arms. "Tell me, Elena, when you slept with Julian, was it worth it?" The question hung in the air, naked and brutal. "We were in love," Elena lied. It was the script she had recited to herself for years. "No," Lucas said. He shook his head slowly. "If you had fallen in love, I could have respected that. Love is messy. People change. But you didn't love him. You tolerated him." He stepped into her personal space. She could smell the rain on his jacket. "You looked at me, and you saw a slow climb. You looked at him, and you saw an elevator. You didn't cheat because of passion, Elena. You cheated because you were ambitious, and you were impatient, and you thought I was holding you back." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. The truth was a physical weight in her stomach. She remembered the nights with Julian, the awkwardness, the boredom she suppressed, the way she would focus on the promotion to get through the intimacy. "I wanted to be someone," she whispered. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and humiliating. I didn't want to be invisible. You weren't invisible to me, Lucas said. His voice dropped, devoid of pity. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? He reached out, and for a terrifying second, she thought he was going to touch her face. Instead, he reached past her and picked up the red marker. He drew a circle around the foundation of her drawing. That's the problem with your design, Elena. It's the same problem with your life. You build high, but you don't check the ground underneath. You built a career on a man who was bankrupting the company. You built a marriage on a transaction. He capped the marker and tossed it onto the blueprints. The cantilever wasn't the issue, he said, turning to walk away. The issue is that you're trying to build a monument on quicksand. Fix the foundation, or the whole thing comes down. Elena watched him walk into the darkness of the hallway. She stood alone in the pool of light, the silence of the office deafening, realizing that he had just dismantled her entire excuse for existence without raising a hand. The shredder in the corner of the office was the only sound in the room, a rhythmic grinding that punctuated the end of an era. Julian Sterling stood by his desk, stuffing papers into a cardboard box. He looked smaller than Elena had ever seen him. The bluster was gone, replaced by the shaky movements of a man who had gambled on the wrong leverage. Security waited outside the glass door, patient and humiliatingly visible. "You can't do this, Lucas," Julian muttered, though the fight had long since left his voice. "My grandfather built this firm." "And you sold it," Lucas said. He was leaning against the window watching the city. He didn't turn around. "You sold it the moment you started leveraging client retainers to cover your personal debts. The board voted unanimously this morning, Julian. You're out. The buyout check is on the table. Take it and go." Julian looked at Elena, seeking an ally. Elena sat in the guest chair, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. The pity she felt was sickening, mostly because it was a reflection of her own precarious position. Julian grabbed his box. He paused at the door, looking back at Lucas. "She'll leave you again, you know. She's a climber." "She's not my wife, Julian," Lucas said, finally turning. His face was impassive. "She's my employee, and that's a different contract." Julian left. The silence he left behind was heavy. Lucas walked over to the desk that was now undeniably his, and sat down. He picked up a folder. "Now regarding you," he said. Elena straightened her spine. She had prepared for this moment. She expected the termination letter. She expected the satisfaction of a final revenge. Lucas slid a document across the desk. "This is an offer for the position of lead design architect," Lucas said. "It comes with a competitive salary, full benefits, and creative control over the residential sector." Elena stared at the paper. It wasn't a termination. It was a job offer. But as she read the fine print, the reality set in. "Lead architect," she repeated. "Not partner?" "No," Lucas said. "The partnership structure is being dissolved. Vesper Holdings operates on a merit-based hierarchy. You are a talented designer, Elena, one of the best I know, but you are not a leader. You compromise the firm's integrity for your own advancement. You can stay, do the work, and rebuild your reputation. But you will answer to a board. You will answer to me." He leaned back, watching her. "It's a good job. It's safe." Elena looked at the contract. It was everything she had ostensibly wanted: a chance to design, a high salary, stability. But the cost was clear. She would be staying in the house he owned, working under the ceiling he set, forever reminded that she was there by his grace, not her own power. It was a cage, a gilded, comfortable cage. She looked up at Lucas. For the first time in 5 years, she saw him clearly. He wasn't doing this to hurt her. He was indifferent. He had moved on so completely that he could offer her a job without blinking. He had rebuilt his life. She was still standing in the rubble of hers. Elena stood up. She didn't pick up the pen. "I can't sign this," she said. Lucas didn't look surprised. "I know." "If I stay," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly, "I'll disappear. I need to go somewhere where nobody knows my name. I need to build something that is actually mine." "That sounds like a structural necessity," Lucas said. Elena looked at the office one last time, the view, the leather, the status. Then she looked at the man she had lost. You were right, she said softly. About the foundation. I'm sorry, Lucas. Goodbye, Elena. Oh, wait, and he said. He didn't say, I forgive you. He didn't say, I miss you. He simply closed the file. Elena walked to the door. She opened it and stepped out into the hallway. She didn't look back. She walked past the reception desk, past the empty space where the logo used to be, and into the elevator. When the doors closed, cutting off the view of the office, she let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 5 years. She was unemployed. She was alone. She was terrified. But as the elevator descended, she realized she was finally standing on solid ground. Upstairs, Lucas watched a small figure emerge from the building and merge into the Chicago foot traffic. He watched until she was just another dot in the crowd. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. It's done, Lucas said. The assets are secured. The liabilities are gone. I'm ready to sell the Chicago branch. Put it on the market tomorrow. He hung up. He stood and put on his coat. He turned off the lights in the office, plunging the room into darkness, leaving the empty shell behind for someone else to fill. Lucas Thorne walked out, the ghost finally put to rest, ready to build something new.